And point number 4, the most important person for you to love is not other people, but it's you. If I was to say my most important point tonight, this is it right here. The most important person for you to love is you. Say that with me. The most important person for me to love is myself. Say it again. The most important person for me to love is who? Myself. I want to prove that also tonight because that is part of your conditions of stress. We always talk about loving our neighbor, and we even misquote the scriptures in this regard. But let me just give you something. Let's look at a scripture for a minute where we get this idea from. Jesus was asked a question by someone, and it's a very important question. And to understand the question, you got to understand who was talking. The person who asked him the question was a Pharisee. A Pharisee was a religious leader of that day. Pharisees were trained in all the laws of Moses and the prophets. There were 669 laws, write that down, you're going to remember that the Pharisees tried to obey. In other words, they studied the whole Old Testament, especially the first 5 books called the Pentateuch, the books of Moses, and they extracted every single law or anything that looks like a law. They extracted it because they wanted to obey them so they could be righteous before God. So there were 669 laws when they counted them up. Now that's a lot of laws to try and remember. I won't talk about trying to keep. No wonder why they were always frustrated, because they were far, you see. That's why they call it sad, you see. They were sad, you see. They were trying to do this stuff that was so tough. And it's very interesting. One of them came to Jesus and asked a very important question, and I think it's the kind of question you and I would want to ask too. In other words, look, I grew up in my father's Jewish house. I've been to the synagogue. I took theology. I'm a Pharisee. I've been trying to get this thing to work for the last, 50 years of my life. Look, Jesus, you seem to be very smart. Okay, can you tell me, out of all the 69 laws, here was the question, which one is the greatest to keep? In other words, if I was going to keep one law more than all the others, what's the most important law for a human to keep before God? That was a good question. Because 669 is just too many to remember. And I won't even talk about trying to keep. So can you boil it down for me, Jesus? Just break it down. Just give me the main one. And his answer blew their minds. He didn't say, don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't lie, don't curse, don't worship other gods. He didn't say that. He just said the most important law is this: to love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all of your mind. And then he did something the man didn't ask. The man asked him for one answer. And that's important. But he gave him 2 answers to one question. Why? Because he couldn't answer the question with one answer. Because the question required 2 answers. Now notice what the answers were. He said, first of all, you should love God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength. But then he kicks in. He says, and the second one is just like the first. Now the man didn't ask you for the second one. There's only one question. But you see, Jesus said, look, the second one is connected to the first. Love God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, your strength. See, a lot of us find it easy to say we love God. We worship, we give, I love you, Lord, and I praise you, Lord, and you're faithful to church, and you're always going out to these meetings and prayer meetings, and you go witnessing, and God said, okay, that's fine, but what about the second part? I know you love me. But he says, the second one is just like the first one, which means they are equal. This is deep. He says, and the second one is like the first one, and here it is. You must love your neighbor as you love yourself. And then he says, all the 669 laws are in this one law. If you keep this one law, you don't need the 669. Love God, love yourself, love your neighbor. Now, I want you to read that verse very carefully. He did not say love your neighbor first. And that's where we keep making a mistake. We keep trying to love people without the prerequisite. Let me break it down for you. I did a research on this verse when I was in school in university. It's one of the verses that I researched with my professor, who's going to be here next week, Dr. Jerry Horner. He was the leading, and still is, one of the leading Greek scholars in the entire United States. He helped to translate the NIV Bible. He also translated the New Spirit Bible. This guy is good. He'll be with us next week. Make sure don't miss him being here. You will go advanced like that when you read the Bible. The guy is good. But in his class at university, I remember him, we went through this whole chapter, and it shocked me when he gave us the meaning of the root word that Jesus used. First it says love God, which means to pursue and focus on God's character and God's nature and God's qualities. When you love someone, you want to pursue them. You want to understand them. You want to get to know them. You want to be with them. Why? You want to understand how they think, what they need, what they want, what their desires are. He said, do that for God. Pursue God with all your might. Get to know God's qualities, His characteristics, His nature, what He's like. Stay with God so you can know God. But then He says, love your neighbor as yourself. And here's the words that are used here in the original Greek. It means to the same degree. Love your neighbor to the same degree that you love yourself. In other words, the same measure that you love yourself is how you will love your neighbor, Jesus says. The implication is loving God should result in self-love, and then self-love qualifies you to love other love. Put it another way, you can only love others to the same degree and measure you love yourself. Write that down, very important. Stop trying to love people first. This is why you got hurt.